So it's my pleasure to introduce Ashish Choudhury. He's a professor at IIIT Bangalore. He works in the field of cryptography. You might have heard of it from his NPTEL lectures. So he has a NPTEL lecture which is very popular. So he in particular works in the area of MPC, multi-party computation, and which is what he will talk about today.
Okay, thanks a lot. Am I audible? Okay. Thanks a lot, Chetan, for the introduction. Thanks to Manoj for this kind invitation to allowing me to come and talk here. So this is a joint work with my ex-students Ananya and Anirudh, who are now doing Ph.D. at IIUC and Bharathan respectively. Yeah. So I hope all of you know about secure multi-party computation, but I would still motivate the problem. What exactly is MPC and motivation? So there are several real-world problems where there are a group of mutually distrusting entities who would like to collaborate together to perform some joint computation by keeping their data as private as possible. So let us see some examples of such applications. So example, assume you have a group of hospitals who have their own patient records, which are very sensitive, and they would like to collaborate to do some data mining operation. But in the process, they do not want to exchange their individual medical records with each other. Or consider two mutual friends who would like to know about their mutual love interests without directly relating to each other. Or imagine we have a client with a sample and a remote database server, and we would like to verify whether the sample is present in the database server or not without revealing any additional information. Or consider the problem of privacy preserving machine learning, where we have a group of data owners with their own private data, and together they would like to collaborate to develop a machine learning model, but in the process, they do not want to reveal their individual data to each other. So all these problems can be abstracted by the general problem of multi-party computation, where we have a bunch of data owners with their private data, and there is some publicly known function f, and together they would like to securely compute the output of this function without revealing their individual inputs to each other. Or in other words, they would like to compute the function by keeping their data as private as possible. So this is fundamentally one of the very important problems in secure distributed computing, because if you have a good solution for this abstract problem, you have a solution for various real-world applications. So MPC is very easy if you could trust someone. So imagine you have a trusted third party. The ideal solution would be that each data owner gives its data directly to the trusted third party, and the trusted third party knows the description of the function. It can compute the function output and directly send back the function output to each individual. So this is the ideal solution, but the problem here is that it creates a single point of failure, because if the trusted third party gets compromised, then the whole security is lost. How suddenly we can get someone who is 10% trusted, because trust is very rare and volatile. And if there is trust in the world, then we don't want to do any MPC. So the goal of any MPC protocol is to do the same thing that you would have done in the ideal solution, but in the absence of any trusted third party. So basically, you want to decentralize the role of the trusted third party, where in the protocol, the participants interact with each other by exchanging messages and compute the function output in such a way that no third party PI should learn anything beyond what it would have learned from its own input and the function output. In some way, if we can show that a party PI does not learn anything here beyond what it would have learned here, then our protocol is. That's precisely what we are trying to do in any MPC. So there are various ways, various dimensions in which we can study the MPC problem. So let us consider the first dimension. How do we model the corruption in any MPC protocol? So in any MPC protocol, we assume that we have a centralized entity which we call as adversary, who can corrupt a subset of the parties and force those parties to deviate from the protocol instructions. But now the question is, how do we model that corruption? There are two models to measure the amount of corruption which can happen in the protocol execution. The more popular one is the threshold corruption model, where we assume that the adversary has the resources to corrupt any subset of up to T parties in the protocol execution. For example, if T is equal to 2 and if you have 5 parties, then during the protocol execution, adversary can go and corrupt any 2 out of these 5 parties, and you won't know which are the 2 parties which are going to corrupt. A more generalized and fine-grained adversarial model is the non-threshold corruption model introduced by the work of Hirt and Morrow in 1997. Here we do not assume any threshold. We do not have an upper bound on the maximum number of corruptions which can happen, but rather the corruption capacity is specified by a monotone adversary structure, which is a collection of subsets of potentially corrupt parties. And during the protocol execution, any one subset from that collection may be compromised by the adversary. So for example, again, if we have say 5 parties, then one collection could be that you have a subset Z1 which can get potentially corrupt during the protocol execution, or there might be another subset say Z2 which might be corrupt during the protocol execution, or you might have another subset say Z3 which might be corrupt, or you might have a subset Z2. So you will be given the collection Z1, Z2, Z3, Z4, and you have to design a protocol where even if any one of these subsets get compromised during the protocol execution, your protocol should remain safe. Now you can see here that we are not putting any restriction on the size of the individual subsets Z1, Z2, Z3, Z4. They can be of different size. Unlike the threshold adversarial model where you have various potential subsets of bad parties, each of size 2T. Here we do not have any such restrictions. In some sense, this is more generalized model, and a protocol for threshold model automatically follows from a protocol from a non-threshold MPC. So in this work, our focus is on the non-threshold corruption model. The second dimension for studying MPC is based on the nature of communication network available to the protocol participant, because an MPC protocol is a distributed protocol where the parties have to exchange messages over a network. How do we model that communication network? So again, there are two models which are available in the literature. The more popular model is the synchronous communication model, where we assume that there is a fixed time delay for every message in the network. That means once a message is sent from its origin, there is an upper bound within which it will be delivered to the receiver. Okay, there won't be any further delay. And due to this, the synchronous protocols are very easy to design. You can design it in a sequence of rounds, where in every round, participants compute messages that they want to send. They send those messages, and by the end of that round, everyone receives the messages that their neighbor would have sent to them. And then the next round starts. Okay, and the assumption is that in every round, there is a fixed delay within which the message will be communicated. Okay, so this is easy to understand, but if you want to implement a synchronous protocol over an internet, you don't know what will be the value of that delta. Okay. It could be 1 millisecond, it could be 10 milliseconds, it could be in fact 1 hour. In fact, there might be scenarios where the messages might be lost arbitrarily, might be delayed arbitrarily, because network can behave in any arbitrary way. So that's why synchronous model do not appropriately model real world networks like the internet, where occasionally the networks might behave in any arbitrary way. So to deal with this, there is another model which is available, which is also considered in the MPC literature. This is called the asynchronous communication model. And in this model, we do not make any timing assumptions on the message. Okay, the only assumption is that every sent message will be eventually delivered, but when that eventual event will happen, we don't know. And as a result, an asynchronous protocol doesn't operate as a sequence of communication rounds, but it is executed as a sequence of events. And as and when a party receives a message, it will scan the protocol code, and depending upon what event is triggered, it will do its next set of actions. Moreover, We also assume in an asynchronous model that the network itself is under the control of the adversary. That means the message scheduling is under the control of the adversary. And adversary has full power to control the delay of the message. Of course, it cannot block a sent message infinitely. It has to release it eventually. Now, because of this message scheduling thing in the asynchronous model, if you consider a recipient party, it cannot distinguish between a slow party and a corrupt party. That means if there is a sender who is supposed to send a message to me, then I don't know how long I have to wait for that message. Because it might be possible that the sender has sent the message, but it got stuck in the network. That is one possibility. And the second possibility is that the sender is corrupt and it has not sent a message to me. So I don't know how long I have to wait for that expected message. And as a result, in any asynchronous protocol, we cannot wait for messages from all the parties to compute our next set of messages. And in the process, I might be ignoring communication from a subset of potentially slow but honest parties. And that makes the design of asynchronous protocols very challenging. In fact, it can be shown that in any asynchronous MPC protocol, you cannot take the inputs of all the honest parties for computation, because you cannot wait for the inputs of all the parties for computation, and you have to start the computation as soon as you receive a subset of inputs. But in that process, you might be ignoring the inputs of a subset of honest. That's always possible. You cannot prevent that from happening. So in this work, our focus is on the asynchronous communication model. So that's the second dimension of our work. And we focus on perfect security. That means we are considering an adversary who has unbounded power. Okay, so we are not allowed to use any cryptographic tools which are based on cryptographic hardness assumptions. So we are aiming for perfect security in the asynchronous model against non-threshold adversaries. So let us see what are the known possibility results in this regime. Let us start with the threshold model. If we consider the threshold model, where the adversary can corrupt up to T parties, then the classical result of Benoit, Kennedy, and Goldreich from 93, they have shown that you can design asynchronous MPC with perfect security as long as up to 1/4 of the parties could be corrupt. You cannot tolerate more than 1/4 of the corruption. Whereas if we consider a non-threshold adversary, then the work of Ashwin et al. Have shown that the corresponding necessary condition is that the adversary structure should satisfy Q4 condition. Now, what is this Q4 condition? The Q4 condition means that if you take any 4 subsets from the adversary structure, its union should not cover the entire set of parts. So this is a generalization of T less than n by 4 condition. If you visualize T less than n4 condition, what does it state? It states that if you take any 4 subsets of size T, it is still less than n if you take their union. So that condition is generalized to Q4 condition, where you are saying that you take any 4 subsets from the adversary structure, doesn't matter what is their individual cardinalities, their union should not cover the entire set. That is the corresponding necessary condition for perfectly secure asynchronous. So our protocol is based on the notion of secret sharing. So let us first understand what is secret sharing in general. In the problem of secret sharing, you have a designated party whom we call as dealer, and it has some private input S, and there are n shareholders. You are also provided 2 subsets, a subset of authorized set of people, green sets here, and the complementary set of subsets of people, which are the forbidden structure or the adversarial set. So what we want in the secret sharing problem is the following. We would like the dealer to compute shares for its secret and distribute shares to the individual shareholders in such a way that later, if any authorized subset of people want to reconstruct the secret, they should be able to reconstruct it back from their individual shares. Whereas if any unauthorized subset of people would like to reconstruct back the secret, they should fail to do that. Mind it, We do not have any restrictions on the size of the subset, on the size of the authorized subset. They could be of different sizes. And the red subsets are just a set complementary of the corresponding green subsets. So that is in general is the problem of secret sharing. So we follow the standard idea of a circuit evaluation to do the secure MPC. So in this abstraction, we assume that the function to be securely computed is represented as some arithmetic circuit over an algebraic structure. It could be a group, a ring, or a field. So, for example, suppose you want to compute a function x1 times x2 times x3 plus x4. So you will have a circuit like this, and the detailed description of the circuit will be publicly known. So the standard template for MPC will be as follows. We will start with the input level, where the owners of each individual input will secret share their respective inputs. So whoever is the owner of x1 will act as a dealer, secret share its input x1. Whoever owns x2, it will secret share x2. Whoever owns x3 will secret share x3, and so on. That will be the input stage. And then the circuit evaluation will start, where you will evaluate each gate over the shares of the inputs. Okay. So this box representation you can imagine as secret sharing or some kind of encryption, but it's not actually encryption. Everyone has a share of those values. So for the gate evaluation, we maintain the following invariant. If you have the inputs of the gate available in a secret shared fashion, parties do some computation so that they get the shares for the output of that gate. But in the process, neither the input of the gate nor the output of the gate is reconstructed. It remains secret shared. So again, in this example, once the inputs x1 and x2 are secret shared, the parties will compute the product of this input in a secret shared fashion without learning x1 and x2, and then they will go to the next gate, and then they will go to the next gate. And once the function output is available in a secret shared fashion, they will reconstruct it properly. Okay. So in this whole process, the security is mentioned, but because nowhere you are actually opening any of the values, you are only opening the final value during the computation. Now in this invariant, we expect the secret sharing to satisfy the linearity property so that linear gates can be computed non-interactively. By free here, I mean to compute or to maintain this invariant, we do not require the parties to interact with each other. But to evaluate the multiplication gates, the parties need to interact with each other. It's not free because the secret sharing does not satisfy the non-linearity property. And that's why the communication complexity of any generic MPC protocol is measured in terms of how much communication you have to do to evaluate the non-linear gates in the system. So what are the known results for perfectly secure in AMPC communication complexity? So if we consider the synchronous model, then the existing work of Hirt et al. Have proposed a protocol where the communication for multiplication is quadratic in the size of the adversary structure. If we ignore the rest of the factors, which is polynomial in n and the log of field size, if we just focus on the component which is proportional to the size of adversary structure, it is quadratic. And prior to our work, the best known asynchronous protocol, its complexity was proportional to cubic in the size of the adversary structure. So if we focus on the exponents of the size cardinality of adversary structure, there is a difference here, and it matters. Even though it is polynomial, it's quadratic here, it's cubic here, it's polynomial in the size of the adversary structure.
Is the amount of multiplication?
Sorry?
Is this the amount of computation?
It's amount of communication per multiplication gate.
And the rounds?
Its overall round will be proportional to the multiplicative depth of the circuit.
But for one multiplication?
One round. Because you have to just open a value. Okay. So why this exact exponent matters here? Because in general, the size of adversary structure itself could be exponentially large because you are basically listing down the subsets of potentially corrupt parties. And in general, the size of the adversary structure could be as large as the power set of the set of parties. So the exact exponent indeed matters here. And that is precisely the main motivation of our work. In this work, we ask the question that can we reduce or can we bridge this gap between the synchronous and the asynchronous MPC? Can we bring this cost to quadratic?
What's the usual poly?
Sorry?
What's the poly? What's the
It's 10 power 4 something.
So I was wondering, like, the question structure is small, it's polynomial. Then
Yeah, we didn't look into that aspect. Yeah. Our main focus was to focus on the adversary structure. So in this work, we answered this question affirmatively by showing. No. Yes, that's a very interesting question. Can we make it linear in the size of adversary structure? We don't. There are no proven lower bounds. For threshold model, there are some bounds by the work of Dargard and so. Yeah, but for non-threshold case, there are no proven lower bounds. So in this work, we have affirmatively answered this question. So the rest of the talk, I will first try to explain the existing synchronous protocol and what are the challenges we face if we try to take it to the asynchronous domain, and then I will give a brief overview of how do we deal with those challenges. So let us first start with secret sharing that we are going to use for the non-threshold adversary, and this is a very classic secret sharing due to Ito et al., which is also known as replicated secret sharing. And the idea here is that if you have a secret which you want to secret share, then you divide your secret into multiple shares which sum up to the secret, and you give the shares in such a way, distribute the shares in such a way that adversary lacks at least one share to reconstruct back the secret. So how do you do this? So again, let's take this example. You have the set of parties and you have the adversary structure. Okay, so these are the red subsets here. You do not want any of these individual subset to be able to reconstruct back the secret. Now what we do is we focus on the complementary sets here, the green sets. Okay, so GI here is the set complement of CI, the ith candidate bad set. Now, to secret share the value S, what dealer can do is it can pick some random shares which sum up to secret, and the number of shares that it has to pick is same as the number of bad subsets here. And the ith piece will be given to the ith green set. That means the ith share will not be given to the ith bad subset of the. So in this example, you have 4 sets here. So the dealer would have picked 4 random shares which sum up to S. And the first share will not be given to Z1, but it will be given to the complement subset. The second share will not be given to Z2, but to the complement set, and so on. Now you can see that clearly this satisfies the privacy requirement, because it doesn't matter adversary controls which red set, it will lack at least one piece. So for example, if adversary corrupts, say, the first subset here, it does not have the share S1. If adversary corrupts the second set, it does not have the share S2, and so on. So at least one share is going to be missing for the adversary to reconstruct back the secret. And we can show that if you take any green subset, those people will have all the shares which they can sum up to reconstruct back the secret. So this is a very simple secret sharing. It's not based on any properties of polynomial that is used in some secret sharing and so on. And in the rest of the talk, I will use this box representation for this secret sharing. If there's a value S, it is secret shared like this. That means that value is denoted by this notation. Now, interestingly, this secret sharing satisfies the linearity property. And remember, we need the linearity property from the secret sharing because we want to evaluate the linear weights over secret shared values. So let me demonstrate the linearity property here. So imagine there is a value A which is secret shared. Okay. So for A, there are shares A1, A2, A3, A4, which sum up to A, and the people in G1 they have the share A1 and so on. And similarly, assume there is a value B, which is secret shared as per this semantic. Now, if we let each individual party in the individual green sets to add up their shares of A and B and focus on the resultant shares, then it's easy to see that C1 plus C2 plus C3 plus C4 is basically A plus B. So it is actually a secret sharing of A plus B. And that's why it satisfies the linearity property. That means if you have secret shared values and you want to compute any linear function of those secret shared inputs, then the same thing you could have performed over the shares of those inputs. That's good. Okay. But what about the multiplication? Imagine you have two values A and B, secret shared like this, and you want to compute the product of A and B in a secret shared form, and you are just letting the parties in the individual green sets to multiply their shares of A and B, and if you take the resultant vector, it's not going to be a secret sharing of A times B. Why? And the interns figure out what's the problem here. Why it's not why C1 plus C2 plus C3 plus C4 is not A times B? Because you have the cross terms here. A times B also has A1 times B2, A2 times B1, and so on. And the share A1 is with one group, the share B2 is with another group, and so on. That's why you cannot the product of shared values by just multiplying the shares of the individuals. Okay, that's make the life challenging. So let us first see that how we could have performed the multiplication of two secret shared values in a synchronous network and assuming passive corruption. Passive corruption means that even the corrupt parties will follow the protocol instructions. And this is a very cool trick. I think that in any MPC course, we should first teach this multiplication protocol rather than the degree reduction method based on polynomial interpolation. The method is very, very simple. For passive corruption, the necessary condition for the adversary structure will be Q2 condition. Q2 condition means that the union of any two subsets from the adversary structure should not cover the entire set of parties. Imagine you have two values A and B which are secret shared. So for A, the shares are distributed like this. Why? Because this is my adversary structure. So the first share won't be available with the parties in Z1. The second share is not available with Z2 and so on. So that's the way shares are distributed. And imagine there is another value B which is secret shared. Okay. So different people have, depending upon which green groups they are part of, they have the shares of B. And you want to compute secret sharing of A times B. So if I expand A times B, it is basically the summation of the summits AI times Bj, where I ranges from 1 to 4 and J ranges from 1 to 2. The idea here is that suppose by some magic, I give you a secret sharing of each of these individual summits. Suppose. Then if I give you a secret sharing of each of these individual summits AI times Bj, then a secret sharing of A times B easily follows because you just have to add the shares of each summit AI times Bj that gives the secret sharing of A times B. That's all. Now the question is, how do you get a secret sharing of AI times Bj? Because AI, the share AI is with one bunch of people, the share Bj is with one bunch of people. So let us focus on the group of people who have the shares AI and the share Bj. So the share AI is available with all the participants except the ith candidate subset from the adversary structure. And the share Bj is available with all the parties except the jth candidate bad subset from the adversary structure. Is there any overlap between these two subsets? So if I write this subset here, this is basically the set difference of union of the ith subset and the jth subset from the adversary structure. What do you think? Is this empty or non-empty? Given that you are with Q2 condition, it's non-empty. Because Q2 condition means that even if you take the union of ith subset and jth subset from the adversary structure, it does not cover the entire set of parties. So this is non-empty. Okay, that means we know that there are sufficient number of parties who have both the share AI as well as the share Bj. We can designate any one of them, say the least indexed party who have both the shares AI as well as the Bj, to multiply AI and Bj, act as a dealer and secret share the value AI times B. And that's how you can get the secret sharing of each of these summits. And once you have the secret sharing of each of these summits, you have a secret sharing of A times. And this takes only one round of communication. Okay. And why this will work? Because you are in the passive setting. That means the guy to whom you are designating that you should secret share AI times Bj, even if it is corrupt, will indeed secret share AI times Bj. It won't share a different value. Okay. And since we are in the synchronous setting, we know that within this much time, it should have performed the secret sharing of AI times. But now suppose I try to take this protocol in the malicious setting, where the corrupt parties may deviate from the protocol instructions, then this idea may not work because the party to whom I am delegating to secret share AI times Bj might be a corrupt party. It might add some delta value or some, it might secret share just a garbage. Okay. So how do we take care of this? So let me just quickly give you an overview how the work of Hirt et al. Tackle this problem. So they designed what we call as an optimistic multiplication protocol. And in this optimistic multiplication protocol, the first change is that we are going to work with the Q3 condition because now we are in the malicious setting. And what we are going to do is we are going to run the passively secure protocol that I just discussed in the previous slide multiple times. There will be multiple instances of that passive secure multiplication protocol where in the kth instance, we are going to throw away the kth bad subset from the adversary structure, the kth candidate subset from the adversary structure, assuming that it's a kth subset of parties who are corrupt. Okay. Okay, our assumption may be incorrect. That means it might be the case that actually the adversary is going to corrupt another subset, but in the kth instance, we are not allowing the kth subset from the adversary structure to participate in the protocol. So in the previous protocol, we just took the intersection and designated any one of the parties to secret share AI times Bj. But now in the optimistic multiplication protocol, what we are doing is we are not in the kth instance of this optimistic multiplication protocol, we are also throwing away the kth subset from the adversary structure, and the leftover subset, it's still going to be non-empty because we are in the Q3 condition, and we are designating one of the parties to secret share AI times. Now the idea here is, if indeed our assumption regarding Zk is correct, that means if it's indeed the kth subset from the adversary structure which has been controlled by the adversary, then the kth instance of this multiplication, the value that we are getting is indeed AI times Bj. But if in this kth instance, the adversary has not compromised the kth subset, but some another subset, we may have a different result. And we don't know what's the situation here. So how we are going to identify whether the optimistic multiplication protocol has succeeded or not? So we are now running here multiple instances of this optimistic multiplication here, where in each instance we are ignoring one subset from the adversary structure. Okay. And each of these instances will give us some secret shared output. We want to check whether any cheating has occurred or not. A simple idea will be just to check whether all these values are same or not. You reconstruct the differences, that's all. And you check whether all of them are zero. There could be two cases, all the differences are zero. That's good. That means no cheating has occurred in any of these optimistic multiplication instances. Why? Because one of the instances is actually the correct outcome, where you have actually thrown away the actual subset which has been corrupt. You don't know which of those instances is the right one, but you know that no cheating has occurred. So for instance, if an adversary would have corrupted the third subset, then in the third instance of the optimistic multiplication, the output is actually A times P because you have not let the third subset of parties to participate. And you found all the differences to be zero.
The initial sharing could also be malicious.
Yeah. So we will take care of that through verifiable secret share. Yes. Okay, that is case one. The case two could be that all the differences are not zero here. That means you know that cheating has occurred in at least one of the optimistic multiplication instances. So what you can do is you focus on the least indexed two instances where the values are different, and you know that cheating has occurred in one of these two instances. What you can do is you can run now a cheater identification phase, where in the cheater identification phase, the idea is that you open everything which has been secret shared in these two instances, each of the cross terms, each of the summations AI times, and then you will be able to identify which party has cheated, and through that process you will be able to cross list one bad party, and then you again rerun this whole process. And the idea is that every time this optimistic multiplication instance fails, you will be able to identify one bad party. And once you have identified all the bad parties, you will be having all honest parties in the system. And in the next iteration, the instances of optimistic multiplication will be in.
Yeah, again, you make something like DSS to make sure, like another two people accuse each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you,
Yes. So all those things will be taken care in this dispute.
but you want to identify one party.
Yes,
two parties.
it could be more than one as well, depends
Let's
upon.
say like two parties out of whom one is correct.
Yeah. So this idea in the literature is also known as player elimination, which has been regularly used by the work of Adversaries. The important thing to note here is that we require in this cheater identification phase that all the parties who have participated in this optimistic multiplication are present. They actually make the values which have been secret shared. Otherwise, they cannot pinpoint who has cheated. And this will work in the synchronous setting because you have the timeouts. Okay. So now let us see what are the challenges if we take this idea directly to the asynchronous model. Okay. So remember, all these things that I have discussed works in the synchronous setting, but if we want to design the protocol in the asynchronous model, there might be delays in the network and we don't know how long to wait for the messages. So let us take the optimistic multiplication protocol. What we did in the optimistic multiplication, if we take the kth instance, we didn't let the parties in the set zk to secret share any of the summations ai times b. Okay. And we designated the least indexed party in this leftover subset to secret share its version of ai times b. What will be the challenge if we take this to the asynchronous model? Now this least indexed party might be a corrupt party, and we don't know how long we have to wait for its version of ai times bj to be available. And we cannot make progress in the protocol if that designated party, the least indexed party, turns up to secret share ai times. That's the first challenge. So how do we take care of that challenge here? So now, since we are in the asynchronous model, we are with Q4 condition. Okay, we are no longer with Q3 condition. We are now with the Q4 condition. That means the union of any four subset doesn't cover the entire set of parties. And if we want to run the kth instance of optimistic multiplication, the idea is even if you throw away the kth subset from the adversary structure, and if you take the actual set of bad parties, which is Z star, which is also a part of the adversary structure, if I take away that subset as well, then the leftover part is still non-empty. Because now we are throwing away four candidate subsets from the adversary structure. So you have already thrown away the ith subset and the jth subset. And in the optimistic multiplication, you are not letting, in the kth instance, you are not letting the kth subset. And you are also considering the actual subset of bad parties, which is say Z star. It is still non-empty. That means we are guaranteed to have at least one honest party who can secret share the correct version of ai times bj in the kth instance of optimistic multiplication. That's good. But now how do we identify a non-faulty party? We do not know who is the non-faulty party in the system. So what we can do is, we no longer designate parties, the least, we do not have least index and all those things, that you turn up and use secret share AI times Bj. We let every party to secret share whatever summand it is capable of. But now there could be a problem that two parties turned up to secret share AI times Bj, and since the network is asynchronous, in my view, I have one party who has secret share AI times Bj, and in Manoj's view, there might be another party who has secret share AI times Bj in this kth instance of optimistic multiplication. And our views could be different because we are in the asynchronous domain. So what we can now do is, we can actually run a consensus protocol and go summand by summand by summand, and this consensus will help both me and Manoj to identify one unique dealer who has secret share AI times. So that's the way we had solved this first challenge. So there are a lot of other details which are written here, that how do you run these instances of asynchronous consensus to identify who has secret share AI times Bj. And once you have identified that AI times Bj is done, then you go to the next summand, and then you go to the next summand, and then you go to the next summand, and so on. So that's how we solved the first challenge here. Now let's take the second challenge. So if you remember the synchronous multiplication, we ran multiple instances of optimistic multiplication and then compared all the results by reconstructing the differences. The bad case was when one of the differences was not zero, then we ran a cheater identification phase to identify at least one corrupt party. And the important thing there was that in the cheater identification phase, we need the participation of all the parties who participated in those optimistic multiplication instances. But now in the asynchronous model, the challenge is once the optimistic multiplication instance is done, you identify that cheating has occurred, and then you start the cheater identification phase, the corrupt parties remain silent. They don't turn up to reconstruct or open up the values that they have secret share. And then you are stuck because you are not able to identify any corrupt parties. And then you cannot go to the next iteration because it might again happen that the same set of corrupt parties again create the same scenario in the next iteration, that they do everything, they do participate in the optimistic multiplication instances, they cheat, you identify cheating, and you start running the cheater identification phase, but again they remain silent in the cheater identification phase, and you are stuck. You are not able to make progress. So how do we take care of this thing? So again, we run multiple instances here. We see whether all the differences are zero or not. And suppose we identify that we detect that cheating has occurred because at least two instances, the outputs are different. Now we start running the cheater identification phase, and we temporarily block the parties who have participated in these two instances till they don't turn up and do all their actions of the cheater identification phase of this iteration. That means we start running the next iteration, but the parties who are supposed to turn up during the cheater identification phase of the previous failed iteration are not allowed to participate in future iteration until they clear their backlogs of the previously failed iterations. The idea here is that the honest parties who are temporarily blocked in the previous failed iteration will be released because their part of the communication will be eventually over, because their messages will be eventually delivered and they will be marked as clear. Because the cheater identification guarantees that no honest party will be marked as a cheater. It's only the corrupt parties who will be marked as cheaters if they turn up. So we are creating a win-win scenario here with the adversary. Either the adversary remains silent for the cheater identification phase of some previously failed instance, in which case they won't be allowed to participate in the optimistic multiplication of the future iterations. But the honest parties from the failed instances of previous iterations will be eventually allowed to carry over in the future iterations because their part of the things will be eventually clear. So either the adversary is blocked permanently because of the previous failed iterations, or if they turn up in the previous failed iterations, they will be exposing themselves. So in any case, we are able to take care of the bad parties here. So again, lot of details are written here, that how do you block the parties, how do you release, and the details of the dispute control here. I am skipping because of the technicalities. So let me conclude here. So in this paper, we presented a perfectly secure asynchronous MPC against non-threshold adversaries whose asymptotic efficiency is as good as the best known perfectly secure synchronous MPC. There are a lot of open problems here. First open problem is, can we further improve the asymptotic efficiency of both synchronous as well as asynchronous MPC protocols against non-threshold adversaries? And can we have lower bounds? That's an interesting question. There is nothing known with respect to the non-threshold adversaries. So these are the references which I have used in my presentation. Now some advertisement here. Me with my research colleague Arpita has written a research monograph on multi-party computation against passive adversary. The focus of this book is only on MPC against passive corruption. Passive corruption means semi-honest corruption, where the corrupt parties do not deviate from the protocol instructions. Even though this is a benign form of corruption, achieving security against such a benign form of corruption itself is highly non-trivial and demands sophisticated techniques. So we felt that we should start with a monograph focusing only on the semi-honest corruption, because after teaching MPC for multiple years, I have realized that if you try to cover both passive security and active security in a single course, it becomes very difficult for the students to understand the fundamentals. So let's start with the passive corruption itself. This course, this book has sufficient material to offer a 4-credit semester long course. And very often the protocols against passive corruption acts as a starting point for protocols against Byzantine or malicious corruptions. It has a lot of detailed security proofs. We have covered protocols both against computationally bounded and unbounded adversaries. And the plus side here is that we have a companion video lectures available. So I have offered a course based completely on the material covered in this book, which is freely available on NPTEL. There are other courses offered by me. One is on foundations of cryptography, where I have extensively followed Katz and Rindel. You have a lot of reduction proofs, both for symmetric key as well as public key crypto. So you can follow that. There are 2 courses on NPTEL available. One on secure computation against passive adversaries. This is secure computation part 1, which is completely based on the monograph. And there is a second course, secure computation part 2, where we extensively talk about Byzantine corruption, and we have primarily focused on unconditional security, where we discuss computationally unbounded. That's all. Thank you.
So you use VSS, right, for this
Yeah. Yeah. So again, the idea will be, let the dealer first share the value, and then within each group you verify whether all the participants have got a unique piece or not.
So you use broadcast.
Yeah, broadcast, and then again you complain against the dealer, and then the dealer has to make or resolve the complaints. The structure remains the same as we have for the threshold case, but now we don't use properties of polynomials and all. So one secret sharing could be based on Ito et al. So there is another VSS which could be based on monotone span programs. Right. So there also the idea will remain the same, that dealer first compute the share. Yes. So there also the structure remains the same. Let the dealer first distribute the shares, and then in the threshold case you have this pairwise consistency which comes off because of the bivariate polynomials and all. So that monotone span program also have sufficient nice structure where you have sufficient redundancy between the shares of ith party and jth party, so they can do a pairwise consistency check and then complain against the dealer, and then dealer has to resolve the complaints and all those things. No. It's no longer. It's yeah. You have the adversary structure. That's all. You don't have G1, G2, G3, and so on. So you have the adversary structure. That span program should have the property that the shares of any one subset from the adversary structure should not give you the secret. But if you take any authorized subset of people, then there is always a recombination vector such that recombination vector multiplied with the shares. That's a basic. Now, if you want to introduce verifiability there, then you have to have the interaction among the parties here.
So like sharing of shares?
Yes. Sharing of shares. Yes. And a slow party. Yeah.
So even if the final solution, let's say that a slow party ends up generating a barrier, not because the output is incorrect, because they just computationally slow.
Yeah, but then eventually their communication will be cleared, because the assumption about the model is that the messages of the slow parties will be eventually delivered.
But then
We are briefly blocking that party and running the next iteration. But in the next iteration, what will happen is eventually the backlogs of the previous slow and honest parties will be cleared. So they will be able to participate in the future instances. So they won't be blocked permanently in the system.
They can, completely block
but not infinitely. Eventually it will be released.
For that you would produce outputs, right? Because say that
Yes. But even when you are producing output, you are doing the consistency check whether the outputs are all clear or not.
So the DSS plays, starting from the very beginning, the mainstream blocks and then the participants. But plays honestly with all the correct parties. And so you would see that, okay, we have got enough messages from all the, what do you think are the honest parties? So you would conclude the computation. So you produce an output even before the honest parties are, but that's the thing you mentioned in the beginning.
But sufficient honest parties would have participated. Yes. Not every, yes. Of course. Sorry? So if we want to add verifiability here on the secret sharing, so the standard secret sharing here was that the dealer picks the shares and distribute each share within each group. Now if you want to have the verifiability there, you want to ensure that within each group all the parties should have got the same piece. So they would have in private communicate what piece they got from the dealer to check whether a sufficient subset within each group have got the same piece or not. If they not, then they would complain against the dealer by broadcasting that they have not received, and then the dealer would have to come into picture to resolve those consistency. So the details of those verifiability, how do you add the verifiability on top of this secret sharing, those details I have skipped, but they are there in the paper. You can.
There have been recently some work on this compressed those. Like if it is synchronous, you would like to.
Network agnostic. Yes. So one of my works is also on network agnostic MPC, where we have considered the non-threshold model. And what we had shown there is that if you want to have the best of both world thing, then you need to have two adversary structures. One for the synchronous setting and one for the asynchronous setting. The synchronous one should satisfy Q3 condition. The asynchronous one should satisfy Q4 condition. Plus there should be an additional condition which we call as Q31 condition. That means union of any three subsets from the synchronous and one from the asynchronous should not cover the entire set of parties. And we have shown that, okay, if you give me such an adversary structure, then I can give you a network agnostic MPC. No, we were not able to prove it.
But these other things like Q4
they have proved to be necessary, yes. So that's a very good question that we have left open in that work. Can we show tightness of that condition? Unfortunately, we couldn't show.
So network agnostic is like
yes. Of course, the efficiency issues, no one has done. Feasibility, yes, it's open actually. Tightness of these conditions, yes. Yes. For cryptographic setting, they have shown yes, it's necessary, but for unconditional ones, we are not aware of specifically for the perfect case, we are not aware of any tight conditions. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.